When my story began, I was approached by a person very well known, I would almost say possibly famous worldwide, definitely in Canada, Mr. Rook, Dr. Rook, to have sex with a female. Basically, I'm being invited to become part of this group of elite men, as I describe them, in the city of Calgary. The female who's going to be the topic of my story just happened to come in and walk past us, and that's when he smiled to me and said, "You can have sex with her if you want," whatever. No one wanted to talk to me, and that's key. So now I'm left having to look after my own best interests. Hello, it is June 2022. I'm going to start off by saying the weather where I am here in June is looking pretty good, finally. So what does the Johnny Depp case, the 1989 Tacoma shootout, and my story all have in common? The common factor being different people handling different imposed situations themselves, looking after their own best interest because no one else would. Now, I've talked about, for example, democracy and what democracy really is. For example, 51% of the population can take away the rights of 49%, and the issues with that and what ultimately democracy leads up to. And I've also talked about what a republic is, where 99% of the population cannot take away the rights of 1%. Now, a republic relies on the majority, or hopefully everyone, being, for example, strong in character. Now, the problem that we see in today's world is the majority of the people are stupid and weak-minded. Now, how that became, that's a different tangent, which I've discussed in older videos, and I don't want to digress. But what we see today, for example, with social justice, and why it fails across the board every time, is because of weak-minded and stupid people. Now, what happens when various positions of authority draw from that gene pool? The percentages reflect. Now, I just want to make it very clear, I'm not stating or implying that everyone in various positions of authority are weak-minded and stupid. But for what it's worth, this is the world that we live in, okay? I've also talked about those who have the monopoly on violence and who display vulgar acts of violence. Now, whatever the reason is, again, that's a different tangent. That's not my point. But the people who have the monopoly on violence don't want to allow the opportunity, for example, sound-minded people to have any kind of authority, control over their own lives. That's a different tangent, okay? So where is this all leading? How does this all tie into with Johnny Depp, the 1989 Tacoma shootout, and my story? Well, let's start off by talking about the Johnny Depp case. Now, what we see here is his ex, who was falsely accusing him in public domain, and people, a lot of people, again, with the social justice mindset, the majority, villainized Johnny Depp. And from what I understand, he had lost his opportunities to act and so forth, and they were trying to erase him the whole 9 yards because of false accusations by his ex. So Johnny Depp had to now take matters into his own hands, and using other people, his legal team, to sue his ex. And fortunately for him, he was successful with flying colors. And congratulations, Johnny Depp, for your success. Now, his success is not only for himself, but it also is success fighting against false accusations. Now, false accusations don't necessarily have to be by, for example, a woman. It could be males falsely accusing, and I'm going to get that when I talk about my story. So Johnny Depp's win is a win really against false accusations. And again, he had to take matters into his own hands using his legal team, which did an exceptional job to win his case. Now, his ex countersued and wasn't successful, claiming all this other nonsense. But it's really interesting when you look at his ex, how she could be the poster child for the social justice mindset, feminism, and everything else, and what is wrong with it. But I don't want to go off on that tangent. We look at, for example, now, the 1989 Tacoma Shootout. What was all that about? Probably not even familiar with that story. Well, basically, there was a ranger in the U.S. Army, and these guys you don't want to really mess with, bought a house, and his neighborhood was being overrun by gangs and drugs and violence and everything else. He stood his ground. Now, he made every single attempt, calling the police, saying, hey, there's these problems, help, and even other people in his neighborhood were doing the same. Police really didn't do anything. Now, this is not an attack against police, or especially individuals. Again, there's, for example, good officers and bad officers. And a lot of times their hands are tied with policies, okay? So we have to acknowledge that. Now we're talking about the problem with governing bodies who, for example, give them instructions, perhaps motivated or whatever by money. Another tangent. So what he ended up doing, this ranger, is he called a bunch of his buddies over after things got out of hand for a barbecue. Why not? And he invited them over, saying, hey, if you have any weapons, bring them, Maybe they just wanted to talk about their collections, right? Long story short, the whole shootout turned into a benchmark. How, for example, it changed governing policies, and some really good things happened after the fact. But the fact is, this ranger, along with his other ranger buddies, were fighting a gang who, even though the gang outnumbered the rangers, they had no chance. And it really put them in their place. And he took matters into his own hands. So now we have Johnny Depp taking matters into his own hands, using lawyers. We have an example now of a ranger defending his home, his neighborhood, the community, successfully. So what does all this have to do, the Johnny Depp case, the 1989 Tacoma Shootout, what does it have to do with me? Well, I had to look after my own best interests because no one else would. Now, really quick recap. In June of 2012, I was working at a mental health organization, my new career after law, and I was coming out of a meeting with Dr. Rook, and I was standing in the doorway, and the meeting was just we were just talking about a little bit of everything. And as I was standing in the doorway, the female, who's the center of my story, had walked through the front doors and walked past. I looked over, just to see who was walking through, and that's when he said to me, you can have sex with her if you want. Now, I was shocked, surprised, I couldn't believe that was said to me. And I declined, period. I declined. I said, I don't want to have sex with anyone. I didn't even know what to say. Now, a few weeks after, Alberta Health Services was interviewing everyone. I had no idea what was really going on. But when it came to my turn in the boardroom, they were asking some, what I would call peculiar questions. So I told them what I knew, and I thought this was in confidence, but apparently it got leaked out. Now, there was a series of events that took place afterwards, so I've done plenty of videos talking about that. I'm going to fast forward now. The female that's center to my story was angry at me for not being, as I would call as a descriptive, the front man to helping them. Now, you can hear in the audio where she says she's angry at me and she wanted to tell me to go F myself. And I also have an email, I think about 3 or 4 months after I've terminated my first lawyer, stating that the evidence shows that she got angry with me. And that's why she falsely accused myself and a male co-worker of some sort of sexual assault. Now, she had told me on her own, I had no idea what was going on, that I and this male co-worker were being investigated for raping her, to some sort of sexual assault. I don't even know. I just know what she had told me and what I heard around that time, and I had no idea what was going on. Now, I was told that there's nothing to the allegations, but the new executive director, I was coming out of my office and he just smiled at me and said, "This is not over for you." And so now I'm like, okay, I have to do something. Now, the key part of my story is no one wanted to talk to me. That is key. Now, I had to take matters into my own hands, and that's when I made the first audio recording of the female in December of 2012. I had that recording. It was, in total, it's about 20 minutes long. And by the way, all the recordings, all the little snippets that I've been using in videos and everything else, you can listen to the whole thing. Just go right back to my oldest videos around that time, and they're in full. With my law background, I'm thinking, well, this could be challenged, whatever else, but that's all that I had, and I was trying to figure out, well, what do I do with this? Well, it wasn't until, I believe it was January or February of 2013, where I happened to run into the female in a mall, and she, on her own, because I was sitting in the food court, sat down, wanted to talk. And I had texted a former colleague who had quit long before all this began, but knew what I knew, because I told them, said, "Hey, guess you just sat down." And during that conversation, I'm just going to skip over the details, I realized I had an opportunity to meet with that female and get more audio recordings, not only to vindicate myself, but to also extract information about what was going on with the sexual abuse, trafficking of these vulnerable women. And then that went on to May 4th, 2013. So I had to take matters into my own hands with regards to that part of my story. And then when the two former officers, Mr. Kinnell and Mr. Hayhurst, decided to do some street justice on her behalf and to silence me, and they were very clear when they were beating me. Mr. Kinnell even testified in November of 2013. They did what they did to me, so I wouldn't do that to anyone else. Now, here's the problem, a good example of the social justice mindset when it fails in a position of authority. And then everything fell apart for them. So and then eventually I had to take over my trial after terminating my second lawyer. I had to look after my own best interests. So the Johnny Depp case, he had to look after his own best interest. He had to take matters into his own hands using his legal team. The 1989 shootout with the Ranger and the gang members, he had to take matters into his own hands. And my story is just another example, another variation of my having to take matters into my own hands. And I was told by the fourth lawyer for the Court of Appeal, again, I filed my own materials, all the last two lawyers had to do was argue my file materials. Got thrown under the bus by them as well. But I was dealing with post-traumatic stress. It flared up really bad, whatever. So anyway, I had to take matters into my own hands. Now, how does this tie in, all this ties in with society? Well, people are always looking, for example, for a governing body or someone to save them, or a hero or something like that, when in reality, everyone's on their own. Society's on their own, as a group, as a collective, and so are the individuals within. And that's the world that we live in. It's unfortunate, but it's true. What can you take away from these three examples? Well, you have to be strong in character. And if you're not, then, well, maybe we're due for a great reset, right? Anyway, I just wanted to give you some things to think about and draw the parallel, because a lot of people can only, they'll focus, say, on the Johnny Depp case. They'll focus on the 1989 Tacoma Shootout case. People are taking note of my story. Put them all together and you see there's a common theme, a similarity. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. The false accusations by the female, by the two former officers, by the Crown prosecutor, by the trial judge are all made in public domain. Now there's this problem with government overreach, but is it really a problem when the majority of the people are weak-minded and stupid?
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.